Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to talk to you guys a little bit about why where you feel an exercise burn is a lie. So let me put on my +5 out of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. Because this is something you see a lot in the bro lore, the bodybuilding world, all of that world of feeling a burn in a certain place or where a muscle gets sore automatically determines where you stimulated the most muscle growth or what got worked. And the reality is that simply isn't true. That isn't true. And I'm going to break down a couple of major points for you guys to understand. And what's important to understand is that just because where you feel something doesn't mean that's the entirety of what's going on, because your brain will only let you register pain, discomfort, things like that in sometimes one place at a time. And if you don't believe me, you guys have all been out there. You've all had a headache before, right? And then hit your toe or smash your finger or something, and all of a sudden your toe or your finger hurt tremendously worse than your headache did, and you didn't notice the headache anymore. But did that mean that whatever was causing the headache went away? Did it cure your headache? No, the headache comes back later. You just happen to notice it more. But is the headache still there? Of course it is. Is the tension still there that caused it? Of course it is. But your brain usually only picks up one piece of stimulus at a time. And what you need to understand is that where do you feel pain? When you hit your toe, where do you actually feel the pain? In your toe or in your brain? It happens in your brain. And the first thing I want you guys to grasp is, if you guys remember the stuff Greg Nuckols put out not long ago, to where he said, you know, there does seem to be something to the mind-muscle connection, but there's more to it than that. Because they did studies on some compound movements, right? They did studies on some compound movements and had people focus on individual muscles and then compare them on EMGs. And sure enough, they found that on a bench press, if you focus more on your pecs with the exact same amount of weight on the bar, you got more pec recoupment than if you just maintained strict form, right? And when you focused on your triceps more, squeezing and feeling the triceps, they saw more tricep activation with the same weight on the bar. But what did they also notice? That if you just focused on explosiveness, it got more activation in the pecs and the triceps than if you actually focused on the pecs or the triceps. But you didn't feel it as much. But you got more muscle fiber recruitment. Why? Why? Because the muscles all had to contract harder to explode the weight faster. You just didn't feel them because you weren't focusing on them. You weren't focusing on them. Furthermore, perfect example, and bodybuilders will tell me silly stuff like, well, that's not working your back correctly. When I do rows, you know where I feel rows? In my arms. Because I focus on squeezing the bar hard, because like when I do pin leg rows, I'm very explosive. I focus on squeezing the bar. Do you know the only place I feel rows is in my brachioradialis, my biceps, my forearms? That's the only place I feel heavy rows. Now, bodybuilders will say, well, that's because you didn't just use your arms like hooks, and therefore you didn't get the mind-muscle connection in your back. Your back probably didn't get worked. Those of you who are on my Instagram, you saw the photo Brittany took of my back the other day. A lot of people are like, Jesus Christ, your back has gotten really big. And my back is pretty big. Not pro bodybuilder big, and I can assure you there aren't many guys on YouTube who have bigger lats than I do, or back in general. Again, based on that photo, objective photo, you guys can check out. But my back is clearly growing from what I'm doing. In other words, these exercises that I don't feel in my lats are still stimulating my lats, even though I feel them more in my biceps. Same thing, my chin-ups, I feel them exclusively in my biceps and forearms and everything. I don't feel them in my lats, but my lats are still growing. Doesn't matter where I feel it. You know what I think it is? I think it's because my biceps are weaker than some of my other muscles. I tend to feel those exercises in the weakest link, in the weakest muscle involved. So that might be the case. If you're feeling the bench press more in your triceps and in your pecs, but you know you're using a form of the exercises that uses the pecs as a primary mover because of the form you're using, it might just mean that your triceps are a little weak, so they're getting a little more fatigue, so you're noticing it there more. It doesn't mean your pecs aren't going to grow. It doesn't mean your pecs aren't going to grow. And oftentimes there's other things that are mistaken cues. And this is a big one. You'll hear bodybuilders and people tell you stuff like, well, you need to turn your pinky out when you're doing a lateral raise. If you turn your pinky up like you're pouring water out, you'll feel that deep burn in your shoulder. Do you know why? Because you're crushing the glenoid inside the shoulder joint. You're actually damaging an internal structure by doing that. That is a really, really stupid thing to do. It actually can cause long-term damage to your shoulder. And the reason you feel a burn when you do that deep inside, it's not because of your deltoid. You're actually damaging an internal structure inside your shoulder joint. And that's why it burns. That's not a good thing. That's not helpful, but it burns and you feel it, right? That's a problem. But that's one example. There are others out there of other exercises, but that's a textbook example of an exercise that you feel a burn because you're actually causing damage that might require surgery or reduce your ability to work out later in life. And it's not actually hitting the target muscle. It's just really close because it's only an inch deeper than the muscle is. You think it's hitting it deep inside the muscle, but it's not. It's not. It's actually damaging part of your shoulder structure. So therefore it hurts. What about delayed onset muscle soreness? Did you know that DOMS, when you feel DOMS in a muscle and it's really sore from training, that DOMS you feel, again, post-workout soreness the next day, people will oftentimes take that, oh man, the muscle got really good work. Did you know that you don't actually feel DOMS in the muscle fibers? It's in the connective tissue. So when you have delayed onset muscle soreness, you're actually feeling it in connective tissue in the ends of the muscles and in the ends of the muscle fibers themselves where they connect in. So it's actual collagen tears in the collagen structures, not the actual muscle fibers where you feel that the next day. But people will say, aha, so that means I work the muscles really well, but you don't actually feel it in the muscle tissue. DOMS is connective tissue based. So again, what you feel and where you feel the burn can be a lie. In some cases, it's something besides the actual muscle you think you're working that's causing the pain, such as, again, delayed onset muscle soreness, maybe the glenoid inside the shoulder joint when you do certain shoulder exercises. That literally has nothing to do with the muscle being worked. But it's close enough in proximity that that's where you think it is. Or the case of that's just happened to be where your brain decides that you feel it. Right? Just like stubbing your toe when you've got a headache. The headache didn't go away. Or, again, these studies where we look at where what you focus on is where you happen to feel more, you get more recruitment, but you would actually get more recruitment in all the muscles, including the other ones, if you just lifted the weight more explosively with good form. This is based upon EMG data. But if we were to go with that latter and you just moved it more quickly, you won't feel it as much as in the muscle that you concentrated on. So there's a lot of gray areas here, and people need to remember that. What you need to use to assess what's being worked is the form that you use and the biomechanics you use. In other words, it is impossible if you use a certain form on the bench press or the dip for your pectorals to not get worked heavily and be a primary mover. There's certain ways that if you squat, it is impossible for the glutes to not receive enormous amounts of stimulation. It is impossible for the quads not to receive enormous amounts of stimulation if you put the hip angles and the load in a place to where those muscles are required to be primary movers. Biomechanics, technique, joint angle specificity, that is what's going to determine muscle activation. And obviously, moving the weight more quickly always causes more muscle fiber recruitment in those areas, even more so than concentrating on them, as long as you're doing so with the correct technique. In other words, not if you cheat to explode a weight up, but if you're using good form and you lift explosively, you're actually causing even more muscle fiber recruitment. So this should be your determination of what's being worked, not what you feel, because how you feel in some cases can be real, it can be true, but in other cases it's a lie. And it's just what your brain happens to be registering for whatever number of reasons, but it's not necessarily based upon the actual physiology and what's being recruited in the muscles. It's not always true. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.